So it's Thursday. I'm going to talk a little bit, just quickly about, again, ways to use AI in this. Uh, and the We started the learning activity last time. We are trying to get the weather app to work in Flutter in Firebase Studio. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can try to add Firebase to a Flutter app in that sort of stuff. Uh, Again, using AI to do that. Um, Remember, the project is due, the first part of the project 3.1 is due this Sunday there. And so I want to give you some time today in class to work on that. So I'm going to actually go through and do the bonus assignment of adding Firebase stuff, like Firebase authentication to the weather app, and walk through that. And if you want to do that, you can, but you can also just focus on doing your own stuff. So remember that with the project here, you want to do, you want to write a concept brief. My kind of idea here is that, let's say you wanted to be your own startup company, and you, rather than hiring a bunch of other developers, you'll just use AI to do all the development. And again, there's actually lots of people trying to do this right now. And then, so you want to develop a minimal app so you can get some funding. So someone will give you $1 million to build this app, or at least that's the West Coast vibe of things. The Midwest vibe is, so you can maybe release the app for free, get some audience, and start building some revenue from that. So I've also, that's, I guess, maybe more realistic approach, because you might not have friends who are in venture capital right now. But so idea is that, maybe can you think of an app? So again, you don't have to do this the final project. You're open to any topic, do anything. But my thought is that, can you think of some niche, some little area that you are interested in, that there isn't a website or an app, or a very good solution there, and you want to add a better solution or something like that. So maybe you like to I'm trying to think of some niche area. Maybe you like to bake bread and track recipes and keep track of that. And you want to have an app that every time you make bread, it turns out a little differently, even though you might be using the same recipe, and it may be tied to humidity. In the winter, it's drier in your kitchen. In the summer, it's humid. So you want not just a recipe app, but you want a bread or baking app that also, where you can enter every time you bake what the results are, so it can start tracking that, so that in the future it can give you more specific adjustments to the recipe based on current conditions there, whatever those are. So I mean, that's very much a niche market, but something that maybe there'd be 10,000 people would want to do that in the world for you to use. So think of that, some little thing that you can build and you could release. I mean, we're just doing it in class, and we're just trying, but again, the dream is that now we have this super AI, it can develop anything, and we can create this magical app that we're going to make us rich, sort of stuff there. And you only owe me a 1% cut. Your first 100,000, I don't want anything. But after you make 100,000, all I ask is for a 1% cut. That's all I ask. Okay, just keep that in mind. It can be a gift to the college at that point. I don't actually need it personally, but that's okay. And just so you know, the people who have gone on to make that have not given me the money. So I won't hold you to that. I'll still invite you back to be a guest speaker though. Okay. So that's your design this week. Your first assignment is to do the design. Now again, usually when you're writing for class, you don't want to be using AI, but again, we're trying to see what AI looks like. So I encourage you to use AI to help you write this concept brief. and reword it and wordsmith it and work with AI. So you're encouraged to try. And again, I think it's interesting to use AI. I know I was talking to Brandon. He was using AI for a presentation. He got, he did one draft of it using AI a lot. He said it wasn't that great. So then he had to go back and un-AI the presentation because AI, just did not do what he wanted. It went down, yeah. So again, I want you to try, see how you can use AI and what problems it has. It also, AI is great for things like brainstorming user personas, brainstorming ideas, customer needs, alternative features, screen flows, all that sort of stuff. Application architecture, AI can help you brainstorm those sorts of stuff. So get an initial concept brief, 1 or 2 pages here. And then once you have that, create a basic an app for it. Do the initial prompt, like basically what we did last class with the weather app. Just try to get some basic, what we would call a minimum viable product out there with that. So that's what's due Sunday. And then next week we will build and pivot. And just so you know, eventually you're going to have to present at the showcase. But this is kind of weird. But for project 3, you can present any of the projects you did so far in this class. So you don't have to present project 3 as the project 3 project at the showcase. So if you are really proud of your project 1 or your project 2, you could present that. Okay, so you just have to share something at the showcase. I would suggest whatever project you think is coolest, that's the one you should show. Whatever you're, more into, you think is neatest, you should show that at the showcase. And then back 3, yeah, then we do the retrospective. Okay, so let's jump. Any questions on the final project 3 stuff? Okay. Like I was saying, so we worked on the learning activity doing this Flutter app and seeing how far we went with that. And I think we did fairly well. It was interesting to see the different weather apps they had. And again, I'll just talk about adding some features to this. So one thing I didn't like in my weather app is that when I entered the city here, I wouldn't know what to do. I did enter like Duluth, and it was unclear which one it was or what Duluth it was. So I added an auto complete feature here. So if I type in a city or some part of a city, it will list all the different options here. So I have AI, and it's using the Open Weather database for that. So then I can click on that and get the weather there. I still don't like my display. I could refine that, but now I was having trouble with this. Here AI was, again, because my built-in model is not very good. I think it's using 2.5 Flash there. It wasn't working very well. So what I actually did, and I do this often, is I use 2 AIs. I use this and I use another AI. And I try to find another AI that maybe I'm paying for, has a better model or something like that. I don't know if you remember, but, and maybe you've done this, Gemini gave students access to the pro version at some point for a while, or there's been different, I think they have a current offer for that. And also, I think in a couple of weeks, the college is going to be opening up Gemini on campus to all students and giving some special features with Gemini. So you should watch that in the before you go away for winter break. But anyway, I have another email address that I have Gemini Pro. Not quite sure how I have Gemini Pro because I don't pay for it, but I have it on that email address. So I just went over there, and initially I tried different things. I just gave it the GitHub address and said, can you look at that and tell me about this app? And I wanted to see, and it went through and looked a little bit at the app, but really didn't look much. It seemed like it's struggling reading that. I also tried ChatGPT newest 5.1 there, and it had trouble reading the GitHub also, which I thought, because it's a public GitHub, I thought both of that was interesting. I thought that would work, and maybe there was something wrong that I was doing, but I didn't get to. So I resorted to what I have done before, and again, I was getting an error, and it wasn't seeming to diagnose that error correctly. Here it was talking about missing packages and stuff, and I was pretty sure that wasn't it. So what I did is I went to GitHub and I just downloaded all my file. Well, and again, there aren't that many Dart files. I think there are 6 Dart files, maybe 5 Dart files here. So I just downloaded these Dart files and then uploaded them into Gemini, all of the Dart files here, and just said, can you review this and tell me something about it? So I gave it a little prompt about that. And and again, I was having problems with this one autocomplete, and it quickly pointed out that there was this error. And it found I didn't even tell it where the error was. It knew where the error was. It said this was removed in the new version 5 of this type ahead package. It's been replaced by this, and here's your version of it. And it displayed that version up over here, and it summarizes the changes. So I just took that, code, pasted it in over here to replace this main.dart, and then told this AI what this was. And it said, oh yeah, now I see there has been an update in the packages. I didn't see that. That was a good idea. Your fix looks good. So there. And so that's what I often do, is work these two AIs together, try to keep them in sync so they know what I'm doing in both. So again, same thing. I asked it, like, I had another error, so I add that. And again, I would try to fix the error here with my built-in model, and it was struggling. But, again, I'm using Gemini 3, I think, here, or whatever. It is and this is what I've seen, is some of the newer models are much better at there is significant improvement in the newer models there. Listening to a podcast, a travel podcast, and one of the podcasters said, they were talking about using AI. And he said, oh, I used AI to help try to plan a trip back in 2022, and AI just did not do a very good job. So I don't use AI for traveling, for trip planning. And I was just thinking, you used AI in 2022, and you haven't tried it since then for trip planning? And the other person in the podcast said, oh, I use, it's much better. And I agree. I mean, the world of AI has changed drastically since 2022. And again, same with these models. Some of these models are much better than other models at coding, especially if you can switch to like a thinking or a longer, not a fast model. So again, every error I was able to, every issue I had twice now. So again, it said, oh, it looked like the problem is in this API.service Dart file there. You're doing it this way. It should be doing it this way. Here's an updated version, and it gives me the whole file. I just copy that whole file, go over here, open that file up, and paste that whole file in, and tell my local AI here, hey, I've updated this. Look through it. What do you think? I was trying to fix error. So again, that's one of the methods I use when trying to solve or debug issues there. If I'm just relying on AI for some of this stuff, and that's what we're trying to test here. Now, one thing I do encourage you to do is go through and look at this, the actual code at some point and see how it is. Sometimes I see way too much error checking or something. Like in this code, they generate, I don't know if you remember last time, it generated all these test plans and unit tests and unit test providers and test services, this whole test area, which I probably, if I were going forward, I'd probably delete it and redo it, because it created it to try to fix some error that it wouldn't be solved by that. So I don't know if that okay, sometimes it's error checking and testing is true. But if I look through this, I can see, the basic layout here of an app. We have this weather homepage. Here's my stateful thing, and here's my text edit controller. That looks pretty good, named well. Here's my weather provider there. And again, we haven't talked too much about weather providers or how providers work. So you might want to do some searching or what that. But there's a change notifier provider widget here that we provide, and we provide a weather thing. And so that kind of updates our material app when the weather provider provides new data for that. So you can, we haven't talked about that, but again, and it's not that complicated of a setup, I don't think here. And then we have, this is my main layout of my page. And again, this is done pretty well. Now, some of this I don't know. Certainly I know scaffold here. I know padding and column, size box. The single child scroll view, I've seen a couple times, but not very much. But again, it recommended that at some point to get rid of this safe area. I'm not sure what that does. So I might want to look that up. I might want to see if ask AI if that needed. Can I get rid of that? What is that for? Because again, I think if you remember at some point in my app, it was getting overflow errors, and overflow errors were actually in another widget that was on this page, but I wasn't clear on that. It wasn't clear. So I think it added the single child scroll view and the safe area to try to get those errors. And I don't think either of those maybe are needed anymore. So I might ask it to clear up. So you might want to go through and ask AI, can I, what is this? Can I get rid of this to clean up some of this code? Mine did a pretty good job of breaking components up. Sometimes I've seen AI not do this very well, but it has this weather search component down here. I think it's kind of long right now, but it's not, at least it's a separate component for this. It has the, build weather display and current weather. Each of these subunits are in its own little area. So I think it did, again, there are times where I've had to ask AI to divide, to implement more. And again, we kind of talk about this in the project. We want you to look at the correct software architecture here, and there's this idea of maybe like a single responsibility principle where each class should be doing only one thing, or a separation of responsibilities there. And so again, it's kind of with Flutter here, I'm not so worried about each class having a single responsibility, but I think each widget should have kind of a single responsibility. So each method or widget should kind of have just one thing it does. So I like to see that. So, okay. I'm going to try to add this Firebase to this app. So I'm just going to ask it to do that. I'm going to try to be specific enough and start simple. I just want to have authentication, and I want to just start with user email and password. So I want to make sure I say add authentication and just use email and password to start. So you add Firebase authentication to this app. I want to allow users to log in with their email and password initially. I'm going to tell why. Eventually, I want to store their home city in Firebase or Firestore. But we can add that later. You start with just do authentication. And a basic login screen. Okay, again, something like that, uh, I think generally will work. If you remember when we added Firebase to Flutter, the main problem we had often was actually getting the environment set up, path stuff, uh, things installed. And so like we got started where, oh, we want to do this one command. This one command requires this library to install to install this library. We need that package manager to install that package manager. We need Git, and Git isn't installed. So often we're like 4 things deep of installing stuff in Windows to get this to work there. Um, you shouldn't run into that here because they should have all the paths, all the stuff set up properly. So it should be able to run Firefly config or Flutterfire config, and it should just work at some point. So it should be able. It's updating the blueprint. It's updating the pubsec YAML file. It's doing pubget. There, it's creating the login screen. Creating an authentication service, a wrapper. What we do with Dart and other apps, again, is we often have an authentication wrapper that goes around the website or the app, so that it checks if you're logged in. It shows the app. If you're not, it shows the login screen. So that's what that wrapper is doing. So it's adding that here, and authentication service. It should be running, adding some of the Flutter things to the environment, and then running Flutterfire config. Yeah, so here's running Flutterfire config. So it's interesting. This time it's asking me to run Flutterfire config and to set up passwords. I'm going to ask it if it can do that. Can you enable Firebase authentication and run Flutterfire yourself? Actually, no, it can do this because when I tested this out, it can do this. So I'm interested to see. Okay, so it is certainly I can do this. So again, it's popping up some windows. I'm granting it some access here. And it is running. It just needs me to say, make sure you can run this. So it is now doing this. So again, sometimes it might do it automatically. Sometimes it might ask you to do it, but it should be able, if you just ask it to, it should be able to do this stuff for you. And you shouldn't have to go at all into Firebase to set this up. At least that's my experience. And again, that's one of the things that's interesting with this is every time I do, well, there are a couple different paths. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure that has some randomness in it. There, every time I come into class, I'm wondering what path it's going to take me down here. And it's interesting because we can just see, even with the students here, some of you, work perfectly there, and some of you, you're going to get stuck on something. And it's just interesting to watch that. I mean, that even though we're all doing basically the same thing, we're not getting the same results here. So, okay, so now I think it's stuck over here. It's trying to run Flutterfire config, and it wants to know if which project. So it's hanging on this command here. So I'm just going to choose one of these these projects that's already in place here, and do web and Android, and that's so again, that's one thing interesting. Before I run this at times, and you can run Flutterfly config and specify create a new project and Android. You can specify all that in there. And one other time I did this, it specified the whole Flutterfly config and it didn't pause. I didn't have to do anything at the console. This time it's requiring me to do a couple things at the console. So, okay. So yeah, now it's asking me to do this. And again, maybe it's because I didn't do a new project. So that's interesting that it wasn't able to do this. So I'm just going to go there, which I have so many Firebase projects currently. Okay. So I'm just going to go in and enable email and password and authentication for that. Okay. Okay. Nice. Is set up in this project. So now it's actually, I did mention to it that I eventually wanted to store the user city in Firestore. So it is actually going ahead and doing that, even though I said to do it later. And that's one thing I've run into problems with is uh, sometimes it's not good at knowing it. It just hears, oh, you want to do Firestore, and I have friends that are like this. I have someone I email regularly, and I say, do this, but and don't do this. And if I mention that, they just see that and they do that. I'm like, no, I've tried to put the don't at the beginning or the do not and then the words afterwards, but they still, so I've learned that for some people, I can't even tell them what not to do because they always do what I tell them not to do. It's just like that whole white elephant, or what is it, pink elephant thing where I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, that sort of psychological experiment there. It's like that. And I see this does the same thing. I'll ask it not to do something till later, and it will just get excited and do it there. So, okay, let's see if this is working. I'm gonna refresh the screen, see if it'll have me log in for this. I'm not seeing any login here. Let's do a hard restart and see if that'll do it. Okay, well, I'll let this go. I'll let you stop. I'll stop. And so let me know if you have any questions on this. So, yep. Pause this recording. Again, this is where I've seen this. I'm getting an error. And again, this is because it added this city trying to save the city to Firestore, and so that is generating error, so I can't do that. But what I often do now is if like in the web browser I'm getting this error, I either just copy this whole error or else show the complete log and copy the important stuff from there down. So I might copy like here, uh, uh, down, this error message down and just paste this all over here. So because it doesn't seem to see this error often.